and thanks for joining me. As you can see, it's a beautiful sunny day here in Northumbria in the north of England, and I'm out for a ride on my Triumph Bonneville T140. And today I'm reflecting on the question of why anyone would want to ride and own a classic bike like this, because modern bikes are just so much better, aren't they? They're more reliable, they require less maintenance, they're generally more powerful with better brakes, they have better suspension, better handling, they're much easier to ride because they've got lighter clutches and lighter throttles. And so again I say, why? Why would anybody choose to ride an old, unreliable, leaky, classic bike? Well, of course, I'm being deliberately provocative here, because here I am riding a classic bike, and clearly I choose to do it, and I really, I love my bikes. So, as is usual with the case, these Songs from the Saddle videos, there's a healthy dose of self-examination here. So I'll start then by looking at my own motivation and developing my argument from there. Firstly, I think there is a big element of nostalgia. Most people who I've spoken to feel that classic bikes represent a golden age of motorcycle design and technology. Modern bikes may be technologically more advanced, and they may in many respects be built from better materials and to better tolerances, better manufacturing processes and what have you, but they've lost some of that essential romance that is associated with motorcycling. Motorcycling is, after all, a hobby these days. It's a pastime these days, rather than an essential means of transport. And so just as people can be nostalgic about steam trains and sailing ships as representing a golden age of transport, they can also be nostalgic about classic bikes. But of course the important difference is that classic bike ownership is within the reach of most people, both economically and practically. Whereas owning a steam train or a tall-masted galleon is not. Every classic bike owner I've spoken to has their own personal reason for riding the bike or bikes that they own. But for me, my 1978 Triumph Bonneville, the bike that I'm riding at the moment, represents the bike that I wanted to own as a teenager, but I couldn't afford one back then. I couldn't afford the bike, I couldn't afford the insurance on the bike. So in a way, I'm therefore now living that part of my youth that was not possible for me back then. And I think this is probably true for a lot of other people. Other owners that I've spoken to, and usually those who are a little bit older than me, then they're clinging to the bikes that they did actually ride when they were youths. And in a surprising number of cases, my friends ride the bikes that they owned when they were a youth. That's to say, they've owned the same bike or bikes their entire life. I have friends with bikes that they have owned for 40, 50 or even more years. And in many cases, those bikes are still on the road and ridden regularly. I wonder if we'll be saying the same of today's bikes built in 2021, whether they'll still be on the road in 60 years' time. I have other friends who have gone back to the bikes that they owned when they were young. So they had to sell their bikes due to family or other commitments, but as they've got older, more leisure time, more money, they have then gone out and bought bikes, not the exact same bike, but the kind of bike that they had, or the kind of bike that they, a brother had or a friend had when they were younger. And I have other friends, and I include myself in this group, who just love the technology of bikes. from that golden era, particularly bikes built in the 19s and the 1950s and the 1960s. Just love the engineering of those bikes and love working on them. So those are just a few of the very good reasons to enjoy owning and riding a classic bike. So what about you? If you are a classic bike owner, please let me know what the appeal is to you, and put a comment in the comments box below. I'd love to hear from you and why you're a classic bike owner and why you enjoy riding classic bike. And so finally, a word about my opening comments, which I hope you realise were tongue-in-cheek. Are modern bikes really better? Well, no, I don't think so. In many ways, I think they are not better. And I think in many ways, classic bikes, I still hold them up there as being the pinnacle, this golden age of motorcycling. British bikes from the 1950s and the 1960s, for me, represent a real pinnacle. So, again, interested to hear if you agree. I hope you enjoyed listening to that, sharing some comments, some thoughts around this subject. See you again. Hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this kind of content, and enjoy further episodes that are coming along. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.